The Council regrets as humanity walks away. Part 1. The silver ships appeared in Earth's orbit without warning on a clear morning in May 2087. They hovered silently above major cities, their hulls reflecting sunlight in ways that made them seem both solid and ethereal. Governments worldwide scrambled their militaries while citizens pointed smartphones skyward, capturing humanity's first concrete evidence that we were not alone. After 3 days of silent observation, the visitors finally made contact. "We are representatives of the Galactic Council," came the message, transmitted simultaneously to every communications device on the planet. "We come in peace and wish to welcome humanity to the greater community of sentient species." The panic that followed was surprisingly brief. Perhaps centuries of science fiction had prepared humans for this moment better than anyone realized. John Miller had been a career diplomat for 30 years, handling everything from trade disputes to nuclear disarmament talks. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for being named Earth's first ambassador to an alien civilization. He stood now in his temporary quarters on Europa, Jupiter's icy moon where the Council had established a base years before humans had even detected their presence. Miller straightened his tie and practiced his breathing exercises. In 6 hours, he would stand before representatives of 12 alien species who collectively governed most of known space. He wondered if they could sense fear the way some animals could. The shuttle ride to the Council chamber was silent except for the soft hum of technology far beyond human understanding. Miller sat across from his aide, Diane Rivera, who reviewed notes on her tablet. "Remember," she said without looking up, "they've been watching us for decades. They know our strengths and weaknesses better than we do." Miller nodded. The Council's preliminary communications had made that abundantly clear. They had observed humanity's rapid technological development, violent tendencies, and remarkable adaptability with what seemed like scientific detachment. The shuttle docked with a gentle shudder, and a door slid open to reveal a corridor lined with a material that seemed to shift colors with each passing moment. The Council chamber was vast and circular, with 12 raised platforms arranged in a perfect ring. Each platform held a different alien species, some vaguely humanoid, others completely beyond human reference. At the center stood a small podium where Miller was directed to stand. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, creating no shadows. "Ambassador John Miller of Earth," announced a voice that seemed to bypass his ears and materialize directly in his mind. "The Galactic Council welcomes you." Miller forced himself to look at each council member in turn, noting details his briefing had prepared him for. The insectoid Verkath with their compound eyes that reflected like shattered mirrors. The floating gas sacs of the Mora whose translucent bodies pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The reptilian Drav whose scales changed color as they moved. The tallest member, a willowy being with 4 arms and skin like polished obsidian, spoke first. "I am High Counselor Janilla of the Elteri, current speaker for the Council. For 50,000 years we have maintained peace among spacefaring civilizations. We have guided young species like yours toward responsible membership in our community." Janala's voice was melodious despite the artificial translation. "We have observed Earth for 120 of your years. Your technological development is impressive, if somewhat concerning in its velocity." Miller stood still, remembering his training. Let them speak first. Establish the power dynamic. Understand what they want before revealing anything of your own position. One by one, the council members introduced themselves and their species. Some spoke of their homeworlds in distant star systems. Others mentioned their particular roles in council governance, trade regulation, technological development oversight, cultural preservation. The underlying message became increasingly clear to Miller. This was not a meeting of equals. The council saw humanity as children who had suddenly learned to make fire, interesting, potentially useful, but definitely in need of supervision. "We offer Earth Protectorate status," Janela finally announced after all introductions were complete. "This is standard procedure for newly contacted species. You will receive limited technology sharing, protection from more aggressive elements in the galaxy, and a clear path toward eventual full membership with voting rights. The counselors' four hands came together in what Miller assumed was a gesture of benevolence. In approximately 3 of your centuries, humanity could achieve provisional voting status, assuming steady progress and compliance with council directives. The Verkath representative, named Klaka according to Miller's briefing, leaned forward on its platform. Its mandibles clicked rapidly in what Miller's translator rendered as excitement. Your species shows remarkable adaptability. Your minds process information differently than most council species. This could be valuable, properly directed. There was something in the way the massive insectoid said properly directed that made Miller's diplomatic instincts flare. He had heard similar phrases from world powers when addressing developing nations. The subtext was always the same. We know better than you what's good for you. Miller listened patiently as the council outlined the terms of protectorate status. The benefits seemed genuine, protection from unnamed threats lurking in the darkness. Between stars, limited medical technology that would eliminate several human diseases, cleaner energy production methods. The restrictions, however, were substantial. All human space development would require council approval, certain research. Directions would be prohibited entirely, and council observers would maintain permanent presence in human governments. When they finished speaking, all 12 representatives stared at Miller expectantly. This was the moment when every other species had apparently expressed gratitude and immediate acceptance. The people of Earth thanked the Galactic Council for this generous offer, Miller began, choosing his words with extreme care. We are honored by your attention and the opportunity to join the galactic community. He paused, watching as the council members shifted in what his instincts told him was satisfaction. Such an important decision requires careful consideration by our world leaders. We will need to discuss these terms among ourselves before providing our response. The chamber went completely silent. The Mora representative's gas sac body stopped pulsing entirely for several seconds. Janela's obsidian face remained unreadable, but the quality of the silence told Miller everything. No species had ever responded with anything but immediate acceptance. This is unusual, Janela finally said. The benefits of council protection are self-evident. Deliberation seems unnecessary. Miller smiled diplomatically. Perhaps, but it is our way. Earth's nations must reach consensus on matters of this importance. The Verkath representative's mandibles clicked rapidly in what the translator didn't interpret, but Miller recognized as agitation. How much time does Earth require for this? Consensus? Miller pretended to consider. 60 Earth days would be sufficient, I believe. More uncomfortable shifting among the council. Very well, Janola conceded. You may return to Earth with our proposal. We await your response in 60 days. As Miller's shuttle departed Europa, Diane looked up from her tablet. That went better than expected. Miller loosened his tie and finally allowed himself to relax slightly. They're not used to negotiating. They're used to dictating terms. Diane nodded. President Lewis needs to hear this directly. The council isn't offering partnership. They're offering a gilded cage. Miller gazed out the viewport at Jupiter's massive presence. The question is, what happens if we say no? The shuttle accelerated. Toward Earth, a small blue dot in the distance, still blissfully unaware that its future now hung in the balance of decisions about to be made. President Samantha Lewis called an emergency global summit where representatives from all nations would meet to decide humanity's response. The debates would be contentious, but Miller already knew what he would recommend. Humanity had reached the stars through its own ingenuity and determination. It would not surrender its future to become a footnote in another civilization's history. 2 years passed since first contact, and Earth had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The knowledge that humanity was not alone in the universe had unified people in unexpected ways. Old conflicts didn't disappear, but they diminished in importance when compared to the cosmic perspective now forced upon everyone. The United Nations had evolved rapidly, transforming into a more effective global coordination body. Space agencies from around the world had merged into a single, entity called the Alliance, with resources and talents pooled toward common goals. Ambassador Miller had delivered the Council's terms, and after intense global debate, Earth had accepted protectorate status, but with carefully worded conditions that preserved as much autonomy as possible. The Council had seemed mildly annoyed by these conditions but had ultimately accepted them rather than risk humanity's outright rejection. Frank Wilson stood on the observation deck of the Alliance's new orbital headquarters, watching Earth rotate slowly below. As director of the Alliance, he carried the weight of humanity's future space development on his shoulders. A former astronaut. With 3 missions to Mars under his belt, Wilson had been chosen for his practical experience as much as his diplomatic skills. He checked his watch and frowned. The Council delegation was due to arrive in 20 minutes for their 2-year assessment, and he still hadn't received the final reports from the Mars colony. His tablet chimed with an incoming message. Director, the Council ship has exited lunar orbit ahead of schedule. 8 of 15 minutes, reported his assistant. Wilson sighed. Of course they'd arrive early. The Council seemed to enjoy keeping humans off balance. The Council delegation consisted of 5 members led by High Observer Zinter, a tall humanoid with metallic blue skin and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with cold precision. Behind him came representatives from 4 other species, each carrying devices that Wilson recognized as advanced scanning technology. Director Wilson, Zinter greeted him with a slight bow. The Council appreciates your accommodation of our assessment visit, Wilson forced a smile. Of course. We value our relationship with the Council. The words felt hollow even as he said them. For 2 years, the Council had provided exactly the minimum technology sharing required by their agreement while demanding extensive access to human developments. We've prepared a tour of our facilities, followed by a presentation on our current projects, Wilson explained, gesturing toward the station's main corridor. The tour proceeded smoothly through the station's research labs, where Alliance scientists demonstrated their work on everything from advanced propulsion to radiation shielding. Wilson noticed how the Council representatives exchanged glances whenever a human innovation seemed to surprise them. In the materials science lab, Dr. Lisa Carpenter was showing her team's work on a new alloy designed for extreme temperature variations. Wilson watched Zinter's reaction carefully. Lisa was humanity's most brilliant physicist, and her work often pushed boundaries that made the Council uncomfortable. This alloy's properties are quite remarkable, observed Zinter, studying the sample. Our records indicate such molecular arrangements should be unstable. Lisa smiled politely. We found that by introducing a carbon nanolattice during the cooling phase, we can maintain stability even at temperature extremes. She didn't mention that the alloy would be used in the new deep space probes being built in secret facilities beneath the lunar surface. After the tour, Wilson led the delegation to the station's conference room where Alliance progress reports had been prepared. As they reviewed human advancement in medicine, agriculture, and clean energy, Wilson could sense the Council's growing unease. Humanity was developing too quickly, pushing in directions the Council had subtly tried to discourage. Your species has made impressive progress, Zinter finally said, setting down his tablet. However, we noticed several research directions that weren't included in your quarterly submissions to the Council. Wilson maintained his diplomatic smile. Our understanding was that only space-based developments required prior approval. These are internal Earth projects. Zinter's metallic skin seemed to ripple with emotion. Perhaps we should clarify the terms of our arrangement. The Council's guidance is meant to ensure safe technological progression. The tension in the room grew as Kellenar, the oldest Council member present, requested a private meeting with Wilson. The others filed out, leaving Wilson alone with the ancient alien whose translucent skin shifted colors like an octopus. Kellenar was from a species called the Verteth, rumored to be among the founding members of the Council. Director Wilson, Kellenar began, his voice surprisingly gentle, I have observed many young species join the galactic community. Some thrive under Council guidance, others ... He paused. Find the transition more difficult. Wilson waited, saying nothing. Your species advances remarkably quickly, Kelena continued. Your adaptability is unprecedented in council records. This causes concern among some members. Wilson leaned forward slightly. Is adaptation a problem? Kellener's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a pale blue. The council has existed for 50,000 years. We found that species who rush off and stumble into dangers they're not prepared to face. His large eyes blinked slowly. The galaxy contains threats you cannot imagine. Technologies that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than Earth. The Council's guidance is a protection, not a limitation. Wilson considered his words carefully before responding. With respect, Kellener, humanity stumbled its way to the stars without your guidance. We're simply continuing our journey. We value the Council's wisdom, but we must follow our own path. Kellener studied Wilson for a long moment. I sense that humans will not be content with the traditional protectorate role. It wasn't a question. Wilson shrugged slightly. We're explorers by nature. Always have been. Kellener rose from his seat, towering over Wilson. I will share my impressions with the Council. I suggest your species reflect on the benefits of patience. With that cryptic warning, he glided from the room, leaving Wilson alone with his thoughts. Later that evening, after the council delegation had departed, Wilson met with Lisa Carpenter in his private office. They're suspicious, he said without preamble. Lisa nodded. They should be? The Carpenter Drive prototype exceeded all expectations in yesterday's test. She placed a small data chip on his desk. We achieved 93% efficiency. In the phase transition, the council's theoretical models said anything above 60% was impossible. Wilson stared at the chip, understanding its implications. If Lisa's drive worked as promised, human ships could potentially travel faster and more efficiently than council vessels. How soon until we can install it in a ship? Lisa considered the question. 3 months for a working prototype. 6. For something reliable enough for human transport. Wilson nodded slowly. Keep it completely off the official records. Route all materials through the Mars supply chain. He gazed out his window at Earth below. The Council is watching us more closely than ever. Zinter sent an encrypted message to their homeworld before they left. Our intelligence couldn't crack it, but the timing suggests it wasn't a positive report. As Wilson dismissed Lisa, his tablet chimed with an incoming message from President Lewis, the subject line. Read simply, Phase 2 authorization, Wilson. Opened it and read the brief contents, then deleted it permanently. The message confirmed what he already knew. Humanity was no longer content to play by the Council's rules. Earth had been quietly building and planning, establishing self-sufficient colonies throughout the solar system, and developing technologies the Council believed were centuries beyond human capability. Phase 2 would accelerate these efforts, preparing humanity for the day when the Council's guidance would become too restrictive to bear. Wilson looked again at the beautiful blue planet below, wondering how long they had before the Council realized that their newest protectorate had no intention of remaining under their thumb. The game was changing, and humanity was writing new rules. 5 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. Earth had changed dramatically in that time. The Alliance had established permanent colonies on Mars, with smaller outposts on the Moon and in the asteroid belt. 3 interstellar probes using conventional propulsion had been launched toward nearby star systems. Their progress diligently reported to the Council as required by the Protectorate Agreement. What remained unreported were the other 7 probes, launched using the Carpenter Drive. Now fully operational and capable of speeds the Council believed impossible for human technology. These secret probes had already reached and begun surveying potential colony sites in nearby star systems, transmitting data back through hidden quantum channels that the Council's monitoring systems couldn't detect. Earth governments had united, further under the pressure of cosmic perspective, forming the United Earth Directorate with Gregory Martinez as its first elected president. Martinez had campaigned on a platform of careful cooperation with the Council while strengthening human independence, a delicate balance that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The massive Council ship arrived without prior notification, appearing suddenly in Earth orbit one morning in a display of technological superiority that was clearly intentional. Its design was unlike the previous Council vessels humans had seen, with sharp angles and weapon emplacements visible along its hull. The message that followed was terse. Grand Counselor Vextrol requested an immediate meeting with Earth's leadership. President Martinez stood at the window of his office in the new Geneva complex, watching the distant shape of the Council vessel through breaks in the clouds. "They know something," he said quietly to his advisors gathered behind him. Admiral Susan Wright, commander of Earth's defense fleet, nodded grimly. "The timing suggests they've detected one of our Carpenter probes. Their monitoring stations near Alpha Centauri reported unusual readings last month according to our intelligence." Martinez turned to face the room. "What are our options if this turns confrontational?" Secretary of State Alan Bennett removed his glasses slowly. "Diplomatically, we can cite Article 17 of the Protectorate Agreement, which allows for independent research with delayed reporting, militarily ... to..." He glanced at Admiral Wright, who finished his thought. "We're outmatched. In conventional terms, their technology is centuries beyond our public capabilities. But their ships are designed for ceremonial functions and trade. They haven't fought a war in 10,000 years." The meeting with Vextrol took place in the United Earth Directorate's Grand Hall, a symbolic location representing humanity's new unity. The Grand Counselor was an imposing figure, nearly 8 feet tall, with a mantis-like appearance that humans found instinctively unsettling. 4 arms folded precisely across his chitinous chest as he surveyed the human delegation, with compound eyes that reflected the room in countless tiny facets. "President Martinez," Vextrol began, his mandibles clicking between words in a way the translation system couldn't quite filter out. "The Council has been monitoring Earth's development with growing concern. Your species has expanded beyond approved boundaries and pursued technologies outside your authorized development path." His voice carried no emotion that humans could recognize, but the message was clear. Martinez maintained a diplomatic smile. "Grand Counselor, we've adhered to all reporting requirements. If there are specific concerns," Vextrol cut him off with a sharp gesture. "The Council has intercepted an artificial object near the star you call Alpha Centauri. This object was using propulsion technology not shared with your species. Technology you cannot possibly have developed independently at your current evolutionary stage." Martinez exchanged glances with his advisors, a moment of silent communication. They had prepared for this possibility, but not so soon. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding," Martinez offered smoothly. "We would need to examine your evidence before responding to such serious allegations." Vextrol's mandibles clicked rapidly, and what humans had learned indicated irritation. "There is no misunderstanding. The Council has unanimously approved enhanced cooperation protocols for Earth, effective immediately." With practiced precision, the Grand Counselor activated a holographic display showing a complex document. "These protocols will place human technological development under direct Council supervision for your own protection and the stability of the galactic community." The human delegation remained outwardly calm, but tension filled the room like a physical presence. What Vextrol was proposing amounted to the end of human independence, a reversal of everything Earth had worked towards since first contact. "President." Martinez studied the document for several long moments before responding. "This is quite comprehensive, Grand Counselor. Earth's government will need time to review these protocols before implementation." Vextrol's compound eyes seemed to focus more intensely. "These are not suggestions, President Martinez. The Council has determined that humanity's unchecked development presents a destabilizing influence in this sector. Implementation begins immediately. Council supervisors will arrive within 30 of your days to establish oversight offices in all major human research facilities and colonies." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Martinez straightened his posture slightly. "I understand the Council's concerns, Grand Counselor. However, as per Article 22 of our Protectorate Agreement, any significant modification to oversight protocols requires a 30-day review period by the protectorate species. We will use that time to properly prepare for this transition. Vextrol remained still for several seconds, clearly not expecting resistance. Very well, 30 days. But be aware, President Martinez, that the Council has already deployed containment vessels to your system's boundaries, for security purposes. The implied threat hung in the air as Vextrol departed with his entourage, leaving the human delegation in stunned silence. Once they were alone, Admiral Wright activated a signal jammer to prevent any surveillance. Containment vessels is a diplomatic term for warships. They're positioning for a blockade? Martinez nodded grimly. How ready is Operation Departure? Director Wilson, who had been silent during the meeting, pulled out his secure tablet. The colony ships are at 98% readiness. We've been accelerating preparations since we detected their probe intercept. The Carpenter drives are installed and tested on all 50 vessels. Colonist selection is complete, and essential personnel have been quietly transferring to the Luna staging area for the past month. Martinez moved to the window, looking up at the sky where the Council ship was no longer visible. They've given us 30 days. We'll use every minute. He turned back to his team. Admiral Wright, accelerate the deployment of our defensive platforms under the guise of routine satellite maintenance. Secretary Bennett, prepare our diplomatic response. We'll need to keep the Council representatives engaged in endless discussions about implementation details. He paused, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. Director Wilson, Operation Departure launches in 29 days. Not a word of this leaves this room. As the meeting disbanded, Martinez remained at the window, contemplating the sky that had once represented possibility and now threatened to become a prison. Humanity had reached for the stars of its own accord, climbing out of its gravity well through sheer determination and ingenuity. He would not be the leader who surrendered that hard-won freedom to become a footnote in the Council's 50,000-year history. Across Earth cities, citizens went about their daily lives unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place or the decision their leaders had made. In secret facilities on Luna, Mars, and deep within the asteroid belt, humans worked with quiet urgency, preparing for what would be the most daring exodus in human history. The colony ships, hidden in the shadow of Jupiter's moons, underwent final preparations, their revolutionary drives carefully shielded from Council detection. Lisa Carpenter personally supervised the calibration of each ship's main engine, making minute adjustments that would mean the difference between success and failure. When a junior engineer asked her if she was nervous about the plan, she smiled slightly. The Council has spent 50,000 years perfecting the art of standing still. Humanity has spent its entire existence learning how to move forward. Which would you bet on? The engineer laughed, and they returned to their work, part of a species that had decided, collectively and defiantly, that it would chart its own path among the stars, with or without the Council's blessing. The ancient Council warships moved into position around the solar system, their sleek forms gliding into carefully calculated orbits that effectively sealed all conventional routes in or out of human space. 28 days had passed since Vextrol's ultimatum, and the blockade was nearly complete. On Earth, President Martinez had maintained a carefully crafted facade of diplomatic engagement, keeping Council representatives busy with endless discussions about implementation protocols and jurisdiction questions. Meanwhile, Operation Departure entered its final phase with clock-like precision. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in caverns carved by machines specifically designed to avoid detection, 50 massive colony ships underwent final preparations. Each vessel was a marvel of human engineering, designed to transport thousands of colonists and enough supplies to establish self-sufficient settlements on distant worlds. The heart of each ship was its Carpenter drive, a revolutionary propulsion system that exploited principles the Council had deemed theoretically impossible. Fleet Commander Patricia Reyes moved through the busy corridors of the command ship, named the Horizon, reviewing final status reports on her tablet. At 45, Reyes had spent her entire career in space, first as a pilot, then as a mission commander for Mars expeditions, and now as the leader of humanity's most ambitious undertaking. Her calm demeanor hid the immense pressure she felt as 0 hour approached. The colonists were boarding across all 50 ships, families with children, specialists in every field, a carefully selected cross-section of humanity prepared to ensure the species' survival beyond Council reach. Dr. Nathan Wells, the mission's chief medical officer, met her at the entrance to the medical bay. "Final stasis preparations are complete," he reported, his voice low despite the secure location. "All passengers with special medical needs have been briefed and prepared." Reyes nodded, checking that item off her mental list. "And the genetic repository?" Wells patted the wall beside them, secure and redundant across all ships. "We carry the biological heritage of Earth with us, plant and animal DNA, seed stocks, everything needed to recreate Earth's biosphere if necessary." On the bridge of the horizon, Reyes studied the tactical display showing the positions of Council ships. Their blockade was impressive but designed to prevent conventional space travel. The Council remained unaware of the Carpenter Drive's capabilities, and that blind spot would be humanity's salvation. "Status report?" she requested as her executive officer approached. "All ships report ready for departure," he confirmed. "Boarding is 98% complete. The last shuttles will dock within the hour." Reyes checked the time. Less than 20 hours remained before the Council's deadline expired. "Begin final countdown procedures. Inform all captains to prepare for simultaneous drive activation at 0400 hours. As her order spread throughout the hidden fleet, Reyes allowed herself a moment to contemplate the enormity of what they were about to attempt. 50 ships carrying over 200,000 colonists would attempt to slip past the most advanced civilization in known space, using technology that, by all Council understanding, shouldn't function. Back on Earth, in the Directorate headquarters, President Martinez prepared for his final public address before the Council took control. Only a handful of top officials knew about Operation Departure, maintaining secrecy even as they prepared for their own roles in what would come after. Admiral Wright had positioned Earth's defensive fleet in a formation that appeared defensive but was actually designed to shield the lunar launch site from Council sensors during the critical moment of departure. Secretary Bennett had prepared a diplomatic response that would be delivered precisely as the colony ships activated their drives, a distraction meant to occupy Council attention during those crucial minutes. Martinez reviewed his speech one last time, knowing that his words would need to reassure those left behind while revealing nothing to the Council observers, who would be watching closely. Dr. Lisa Carpenter sat alone in her office beneath the lunar surface, surrounded by the equations and models that had led to the breakthrough that made everything possible. The Carpenter Drive, named after her against her modest protests, represented a fundamental shift in understanding how objects could move through space. The Council's science had stagnated, bound by assumptions that had gone unchallenged for millennia. Humanity, with its brief but intense scientific history, had approached the problem from completely different angles. Lisa ran her fingers over the original napkin where she'd sketched the first version of the equation 5 years earlier. In a few hours, 50 ships carrying the future of humanity would test her work on a scale she had never imagined possible. A soft chime from her computer interrupted her thoughts. It was time to move to the command center for the final launch sequence. As the designated hour approached, a tense calm settled over the hidden fleet. Colonists secured themselves in stasis. Pods designed to protect them during the initial phase transition of the Carpenter Drive, engineers made final adjustments to systems that had been checked and rechecked countless times. On the Horizon's bridge, Commander Reyes received confirmation that all ships were ready. "Begin synchronized countdown," she ordered. Throughout the fleet, computer systems aligned to a single clock, counting down the seconds until humanity would take its greatest leap. In lunar orbit, carefully positioned satellites prepared to release a coordinated burst of electromagnetic noise, a brief but intense disruption that would blind Council sensors at the critical moment. On the Council, Flagship Grand Counselor Vextrol received disturbing reports of unusual energy fluctuations near Earth's moon. Dispatch observation drones, he ordered, his instincts warning him that something was wrong. The humans had been too cooperative in recent days, too willing to discuss implementation details of the enhanced protocols. His aide, a junior counsel, member of the same species, hurried to comply, but the order came too late. Across the solar system, Council sensors registered a massive surge of energy unlike anything in their records, followed by the impossible. 50 large objects simply vanishing from their detection grid. The observation drones arrived at the moon only to find empty space where their sensors had briefly detected the energy surge. Vextrol stood rigidly on his command deck, all four arms tense with rage as reports flooded in. "Find them," he demanded. "Deploy all available tracking resources." But the science officer's appendages trembled as she delivered her report. "Grand Counselor, the objects were using some form of dimensional phasing technology. Our tracking systems cannot detect their trajectory." Vextrol's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. "Impossible. Such technology is theoretical only. Number species at their development stage could possibly implement it." The science officer hesitated before responding. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Grand Counselor. They appear to have achieved practical implementation of dimensional phasing, at a scale our models indicated would require at least another 1,000 years of development." On Earth, President Martinez stood before the global broadcast system, his expression solemn yet somehow satisfied. "Citizens of Earth, today I must inform you of a decision made to secure humanity's future among the stars. While we continue to hope for peaceful relations with the Galactic Council, we will never surrender our independence or our right to determine our own path." He paused, knowing his next words would be analyzed by Council observers. "A significant portion of our space development resources have been redeployed. The Council may interpret this as defiance, but we see it as the necessary assertion of our sovereignty." The message was carefully crafted, revealing nothing about Operation Departure while preparing Earth's population for the Council's reaction. As Martinez spoke, 50 colony ships accelerated away from the solar system, already far beyond the reach of the Council blockade. On the Horizon's bridge, Commander Reyes watched the navigation display as their planned course unfolded before them. The stars looked different through the filter of the Carpenter Drive's effects, somehow both more distant and more accessible. Behind her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems that were performing exactly as designed. Humanity had taken its future into its own hands, slipping the bonds of Council authority not through conflict but by simply walking away, disappearing into the vast darkness between stars to forge a new path. The Council, for the first time in 50,000 years, faced a species that had refused to play by their ancient rules, and they had no contingency for this unprecedented situation. 10 years had passed since humanity's dramatic exodus, and the Grand Council chamber was in an uproar unlike anything seen in thousands of years. Representatives from all 12 founding species argued loudly across the circular space, their various appendages gesturing in agitation. Reports had confirmed that human colonies had been established in 17 star systems, most previously unexplored by Council ships. More troubling, 3 other young species had begun refusing Council protectorate status, citing what they called the human example as their inspiration. The Council's authority, unchallenged for 50 millennia, was eroding rapidly. High Counselor Kriax, who had replaced Vextrol after the quarantine failure, raised all 4 of his limbs to call for silence. "Esteemed colleagues, this continued discord serves no purpose. We face an unprecedented situation that requires careful consideration, not emotional outbursts." The chamber gradually quieted, though tension remained palpable in the air. Kriax, a tall, slender being with iridescent scales and 6-fingered hands, activated the central display. It showed the known locations of human settlements, spreading across a section of the galaxy that the Council had long considered of little interest. Humanity has not only rejected our guidance but prospered without it. Their expansion continues at a pace that defies our predictive models. Yet they have made no aggressive moves against council interests. He paused, searching for the right term, walked away. The Mura representative, a floating collection of gas sacs that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, drifted forward. They have inspired rebellion among species who should gratefully accept our wisdom. This cannot be tolerated. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Kriax raised a hand for silence. And yet, our attempts to isolate Earth have failed? Their technology continues to advance along paths our science had deemed impossible. We must consider a new approach. The announcement of a human representative requesting an audience caused another stir among the council members. 10 years of silence had passed since humanity's departure, with only distant observations and occasional intercepted communications providing any information about their activities. The council will receive this representative, Kriax decided after brief consultation with his advisors. Perhaps we can better understand their intentions. The massive doors to the chamber slid open to admit a single human figure. Ambassador William Rollins walked calmly into the center of the chamber, seemingly unperturbed by the intense scrutiny of 12 alien species. Gray-haired and composed, he carried no weapons and wore no protective gear, just a simple blue suit with Earth's new insignia, a stylized spiral galaxy with a small arrow pointing outward. The symbolism was not lost on the council members. The United Systems of Humanity extends greetings to the Galactic Council, Rollins began, his voice steady and clear. We come not as supplicants but as equals. Not as students but as colleagues. We propose a new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than paternalism. His words caused immediate reaction among the council members, some rising from their seats in indignation. Kriax gestured for calm. Ambassador Rollins, your species violated the terms of protectorate status, utilized prohibited technologies, and fled council jurisdiction. Now you return speaking of equality? Rollins smiled slightly. High Counselor, we violated no agreements. We simply developed along paths you believed impossible for us. As for fleeing, we prefer to think of it as expanding humanity's horizons beyond artificial constraints. The Verkath representative clicked its mandibles angrily. Your colonies exist in systems never approved for human settlement. You spread your influence to other young species, encouraging them to reject council guidance. This is destabilizing to the galactic order we have maintained for 50,000 years. Rollins nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that order needs some fresh perspectives. The council has ruled unopposed for so long that it has forgotten how to adapt. Humanity adapts constantly. It's our greatest strength. He gestured to his simple attire. I stand before you without weapons or defenses because I come with an offer, not a challenge. We bring advancements in medicine, terraforming, and propulsion we're willing to share. We bring perspectives you've lacked for 50,000 years. But we will not bring submission. Kriax studied the human carefully. And if we refuse your offer? If we declare human territories restricted and your technologies dangerous to galactic stability? Rollins shrugged. Then we continue on our separate paths. Humanity doesn't need the Council to thrive. But we believe the Council and humanity would both benefit from cooperation between equals. He withdrew a small device from his pocket, placing it on the floor. It projected a holographic display showing medical data. For instance, our researchers have developed treatments for cellular degradation that affect several council species. We offer this freely as a gesture of goodwill. The medical data rotating above the device caused several council members to lean forward with undisguised interest. The elderly representative, whose species suffered from a genetic disorder that shortened their lifespans, was particularly attentive. In the silence that followed, many council members realized an uncomfortable truth. For millennia, they had mistaken control for stability. The council had grown complacent, its technologies advancing along predictable paths, its member species settling into comfortable roles within a rigid hierarchy. Humanity had shown them an alternative, partnership without domination, progress without permission. We request time to consider your proposal, Kriax finally said. Rollins nodded and retrieved his device. Of course. The United Systems has established an embassy on Europa. You may contact us there when you've reached a decision. As he turned to leave, a junior council aide approached with a message for Kriax. The High Counselor read it, his scales changing color rapidly. With shock. Ambassador Rollins, before you depart, this report indicates a human fleet has discovered a dormant precursor installation in the Sagittarius Arm. Is this accurate? Rollins paused at the chamber entrance. Yes, our explorers located it 3 years ago. We've been studying it carefully. The chamber erupted again, voices raised in alarm. The precursors were a mysterious ancient species whose artifacts were treated with extreme caution by Council protocol. Kriax raised his voice above the din. Council directives strictly forbid interference with precursor technology without proper oversight. The dangers are incalculable. Rollins turned back to face the Council. We're aware of the potential risks. That's why we assembled a multi-species research team, including members of 3 former protectorate races who chose to join us. Together, we've made more progress understanding precursor technology in 3 years than the Council made in 1,000. The implications hung in the air. Unspoken but clear, humanity was not only thriving without Council guidance but was solving mysteries that had baffled the Council for eons. As negotiations began in the days that followed, Council species watched with a mixture of concern and fascination. The humans had walked away from the Council's carefully ordered galaxy and built something new. Now they were offering a hand. In friendship, but only if the Council was willing to change. After 50,000 years, change had finally come to the stars. Some Council members resisted, clinging to ancient protocols and hierarchies. Others recognized that adaptation was necessary for survival. The younger Council species, those who had joined within the last few thousand years, were particularly receptive to human ideas. They had always chafed somewhat under the rigid structure imposed by the founding members. The humans offered them a vision of a more dynamic future. On Earth, President Martinez, now in his final term of office, received Ambassador Rollins' report with satisfaction. The gamble they had taken a decade ago had paid off beyond their most optimistic projections. Humanity had not only survived, but thrived, establishing a growing network of colonies and alliances that operated outside Council control. The new United Systems government, a democratic federation of human settlements across 17 star systems, had proven more adaptable and innovative than the old earthbound institutions. And now, the Council was beginning to recognize them as equals rather than children to be guided. Martinez looked out his window at the rebuilt skyline of New Geneva, where a memorial stood to those first brave colonists who had ventured into the unknown aboard the 50 ships of Operation Departure. They had carried the future of humanity with them into the stars, and their courage had changed the course of galactic history. The Council might still regret the day humanity walked away, but Martinez suspected they would eventually recognize it as the beginning of a new and better era for all species. Sometimes, the best way to earn respect was simply to chart your own path and invite others to walk alongside you rather than behind you.